Hello, everyone. Why do I keep doing this? Welcome to the GMS Magazine podcast or vidcast if you are watching this in YouTube. Welcome, by the way. Nice to have you there. I am Paco Garcia Reed Haeng, and this is a podcast all about games, the people who play them, most importantly, the people who actually make them, because we talk to an awful lot of them, and I
Sounds
am
like
not
a
alone.
movie poster. It's about the games and the people who love them.
Yeah. But not everybody says that, Chris. I mean, I would say something different. So this is about the people who make the games, because nobody pays attention to creators. They just go, "Oh my God, I'm a creator. Nobody loves me," all the time, and it is partly true. No one knows. And actually, I wanted to ask you before we go into the gist of the show, which is going to be very meaty today, by the way, listeners, viewers. We need to invent a word to combine both listeners and viewers. I could say audience, but then that's audio. So anyway, um, but by the way, we're going to have some news because there are some very interesting things that are happening at the moment. I have a review of a game by Alan Barr called A Crescendo of Violence, which I'm going to review in two words.
Ooh,
Yeah,
ooh,
it's very good, very, very good. And you have retro reviews of Cyberpunk, which is going to be very cool and interesting. But I wanted to ask you, you as a consumer and as a creator. I want to know if it is the same in North America. Most people in Spain read a lot of games, play a lot of games, allegedly. I think it's mostly just two or three, but they say they play a lot of games, but they show absolutely zero interest in finding out who wrote them, why, illustration, or basically any of the aspects of publishing, except when it's about, they want to complain about the publishing for whatever reason. They don't like the artwork, or it doesn't say the word she or he too often, or is inclusive, too inclusive, or not inclusive enough. Is this the same in North America, that people don't really give too much of a
I don't
hoot?
know. I know that. Like I think I believe. I don't
Mhm.
think I wouldn't say I have a fan base. I have a very small group of people that do know who I am,
Yeah.
and a lot of people who know Deus Ex Machina know Deus Ex Machina is one person. Now I know that there's a certain point, a certain threshold where you become. I wouldn't say a celebrity, but a name in the industry. But in gaming, it's a very small number. People know the name. If you're in gaming, you know Reiner Knizia, you know Monty Cook. Like these are certain names, but it's an extremely small number. I mean, there are probably 100 directors I could name off, but only maybe 5 or 6 game designers of note. And for me, I try to make a point to not remember the people that wronged me in the gaming industry. I generally look at, it's one of those situations where, and I've been tripped up where I look at this and go, oh, this is the same guy who did this. If I knew that, I wouldn't have bought it. So I've stumbled into those mistakes, but I make a point of following people who I admire. So when it comes to writers, directors, game designers, I have a tendency of following people and going, oh, this guy designed this, especially in the analog board games. I think there are some board game designers that get a little bit too much attention, um, but um, but there are also some game designers I absolutely adore. Um, are there game designers that you specifically follow?
Well, yeah, but then that's what I love. I mean, I love the industry, the role playing game and board game industry, as much as I love board games and role playing games. For me, are one together. I love. I created this podcast on the YouTube channel because I love talking to creators about how they think, what they do, why they do it. Both role playing games and board games. The creation process absolutely fascinates me. That's how you and I met, and the reason why you and I met. So it's something that for me is one and together. So I guess I'm a bit exceptional in the sense that, I mean, if you ask me to name board games or um, RPG writers, I literally have 2,000 in my Facebook feed.
Well,
Most
I have a lot in my feed as well, but I don't necessarily know that's necessarily a fandom. There is this group that do kind of hunt each other down, right? So I do have a lot of game designers on my, but I wouldn't necessarily say whether or not they're fans or we're friends.
No, but I know an awful lot of game designers that I follow because I think they do great things. And some of them I are friendlier with than others. You know, I don't know. I know Bruno Faiduti, but I barely ever talk to him. Whereas I talk more with, I don't know, Eric Lang, for instance, because we have conversed more often, and we shared a panel a while ago. So it really depends. But it's funny because there is a difference between the way that people here approach board games than role playing games. So I have a couple of Facebook groups, not a Facebook group, I beg your pardon, WhatsApp groups, and people in the board game WhatsApp group, they go head over heels for some designers. You know, Vital Lacerda, Stephen Feld, Knizia. They go mental for their games, but also for some companies. You know, Renegade, which we're going to talk about in a few minutes, or Come On, that sort of companies, they automatically get a following, they get attention pretty much right away. But in role playing games, it is the games themselves that get the attention, but not the people who make them or even the company who publish them. So some people may be very interested in Warhammer, for instance, but they may not know what else, you know, Cubicle 7 does, or why
Yeah.
Graham Davis is so important to their Warhammer role-playing game. They may not have a clue.
Yeah, see, but that's there's a certain difference between, like, my game company is identified by me. We're basically the same thing. Wizards of the Coast and Games Workshop is more defined by the corporation than the people behind it, right? The fact that nobody involved with Dungeons and Dragons back in 1970 are part of the people making that Dungeons and Dragons now. But our Talzorian Games is Mike Pondsmith.
Yes.
And Mike Pondsmith's name is on everything. So in role-playing circles, Mike Pondsmith, before this surge with cyberpunk came out, he was always this celebrity in role-playing circles because he was. The same thing with Kevin Simbita with Palladium.
Yep.
Kevin Simbita was Palladium. Palladium was Kevin Simbita. So we knew who these people were. So in certain role-playing circles, and yet, if I were to ask you who ran West End Games, I couldn't tell you anybody in West End Games, but I do know. And the same thing with GURPS. Oh God, I can't remember the guy from GURPS, but GURPS.
Steve Jackson.
Steve Jackson, thank you, Steve Jackson. I was trying to remember the game company, but Steve Jackson, quite literally, is Steve Jackson.
Yeah.
he named the company after himself. So in a lot of role playing publishers and indie publishers started off because one guy wanted to make a game. True. And he had to do it himself or themselves in this case. Just, my gender neutral term of guy. I had to look that up. I had to figure out if guy was gender neutral. Apparently, it's sweeping the world as being now we're turning guy into gender neutral. I'm not sure if that's something you agree with.
No, I don't. And you know what? Whenever somebody says that, I just say, "Oh, right. So you fuck guys." And more often than not, I say, "Oh no, I don't. I fuck girls."
Well, if you ask my wife.
Well, yeah, I know, but that's not the point, though. I mean,
I know your point. Yeah. But yes, so yeah. So we have these games, and so for me, I kind of extended that automatically.
So let me stop you there for a second. I sincerely hope that if I asked your wife if she fucks guys, she will say no. I mean,
no, well, she does. Me.
Yeah, one guy. No guys.
Wait, plural. I'm not her first time.
Anyway, sorry, stupid joke.
Yeah. So, and when I look at board games in general. Yeah, I know Vital Lacerda. I bought games because of Vital Lacerda's name on it, because I really like Kanban. He's Portuguese. I got Vinhos. I like Vinhos. I bought Lisboa. I'm not running out to buy every single game he makes. The same thing, like, I have a lot of respect for Ignacio. We've talked with Ignacio from Portal, and he's a really good guy. So there are certain people I do admire, and certain people, I mean, you have a relationship with Eric Lang. My relationship with Eric Lang is not as positive as yours. But that's just how things are. I you know, he has yet to prove himself with the games I've played. I don't know if I've ever actually played an Eric Lang game. I'd have to check my list. I have played probably half a dozen games by Ignacia. I just mentioned Vitel Lacerda. Um, Reina Knizia, absolutely. My wife is a particularly big fan of, I can remember his name now. Look it up here. If I can find it. Uwe Rosenberg. Thank you.
Yes, yes.
My wife's a big fan of Uwe Rosenberg, even though she doesn't know who he is. But we have owned and played a lot of his games, and I have a lot of respect for Uwe Rosenberg. I think he's a very good game designer.
Yeah, he is. I just don't like his games. I mean, Agricola and be like, sorry, not my type of game at all.
My wife absolutely adores those games. So yeah, there is. I think America likes. I don't know if this is a European thing because I just know in Canada and in the United States we do like idolizing creators, especially because I think it starts off with cinema. You know, from the director of this, from Steven Spielberg, from Christopher Nolan. And the funny thing is that so often, more now than usual, because back in the 70s and 80s, no one gave a crap. It was just like starring these people, this person, big name. But now we're seeing more and more often, we're saying the new film by David Fincher, the new film. And in fact, I've been seeing it so often. I'm like, from visionary director, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, who? And they made one film I've never heard of. I'm like, okay. But that became a thing. Like it became something where they can say this is a visionary director. That's appealing. If there's definitely like there's no cast member to think of, right? So it's like this is the new film by Steven Soderbergh. I always find it interesting that no one says that, even though Steven Soderbergh has made some of the greatest films of our generation. Very few of his trailers ever say the next film masterpiece by Steven Soderbergh, because for some reason I don't know why they just don't do that. But if Steven Spielberg's going to make a film, you damn will expect he will be top billing. Doesn't matter what kind of actors are involved.
True.
Tom Hanks can be in a Steven Spielberg film, and Steven Spielberg's name will probably be higher than Tom Hanks.
Okay.
So there is, but I don't know if this crosses everywhere. I do know, like, I don't know if this extends to Europe, whether or not there's this idolization for creators. And I absolutely love that.
Well, yeah, there's a idolization for creators, but I'm just not sure that there is, at least in Spain, idolization for the creator of board games or role-playing games. Board games are a little bit more role-playing games, but certainly not role-playing games. So anyway, we've been going on about this for about 10 minutes now, and it was nothing to do with the topic of today's show. So let's move on, because otherwise we're just going to talk about this for another hour. And not doing what we want and should be doing, which is telling people some news. Big news. Oh my God.
You first.
Oh my blooming God.
Uh-oh.
Free League again takes the world by storm by announcing an IP that once you look at it, think, how come hasn't anybody done it before? I mean, Free League is going to do The Walking Dead. After, I don't know how many years of Walking Dead being on the screen, perhaps 12, give or take. They're going to do a role-playing game of The Walking Dead. And
you think that we would have seen that by now.
Yeah, but absolutely nobody's done it. But the thing is, they keep making fantastic IP role-playing games. I don't know how good they are, by the way, because I haven't seen the Blade Runner one just yet. I may ask and see if I can get one for Christmas. But the Alien game is absolutely fantastic. It's really, really good.
I have to see about getting, because I actually am friends with the creator of that game. I'd love to get him on the show.
Yeah, I'd love to talk to him about that. And now they're going to do the Walking Dead, which is a bit. I don't care about the Walking Dead anymore, because it's been too long. It's just they should have either kill all the zombies or just kill all the humans, but it's just too long. I'm sorry. And it's too repetitive, so not interested anymore. But I am interested in the game. I must admit, I am interested in the game. So yeah, that is one thing that I thought, interesting. There are a number of things that are going to arrive at your friendly local gaming store very soon. This is a list provided by Leisure Games. Thank you, Leisure Games. You're amazing. So, Colossal is going to come out. Giant Dungeons and Dragons, a young adventurer's guide to dragons and treasures, is going to be out there. Apparently, the Renegade Games G.I. Joe role playing game is going to get Operation Cold Iron. And you know what? It's quite interesting because I've heard some very bad things about that game.
Yeah.
Yeah, people are not all too pleased, so it seems, with the GI Joe role-playing games. I need to look a little bit, deeper into it.
I only heard about that game recently. I can't remember when I heard about it. I do know, like I know Blade Runner. I Blade Runner campaign role playing game sold very very well. I think it did very very well on Kickstarter, um, which I thought was interesting because most IPs don't go to Kickstarter, and I thought it was unusual that the Blade Runner game I think did.
Well, I think that was because of marketing, to be honest with you. And I reckon that the license is going to be enough that they actually needed to get as much money as they possibly could to get it out. So fair enough. I'm actually interested in finding out what the Blade Runner game is going to be like because, to be perfectly honest, the idea of playing a police person who is persecuting a minority, even if it is a droid, it's kind of not what I am looking for in a role-playing game. So
It's also the important thing where um, I always reminded Robert Heinlein wrote a fantastic story called The Puppet Masters back in the 50s and 60s. And then a movie came out based on it in the mid 90s. And my friend who watched it with me said, I can't wait to see it. And then he watched it and said, oh, yeah, I forgot. There's been 10 films that have been ripping off this original novel for the last 30 years. So when the actual direct adaptation came out, everyone's just like, well, it's just like Invasion of the Body Snatchers, even though Invasion of the Body Snatchers ripped off Heinlein's Puppet Masters. And it's one of those situations where people have been ripping off the source material for so much. When they finally come out with the original adaptation, everyone's just like, well, we've done this. So it's one of those situations where now in 2022, we have a Blade Runner role playing game. And I can imagine a lot of people's responses are, yeah, we've kind of had a Blade Runner role playing game for the last 50 years. It's just not been called that.
Well,
and it's one of those situations. I've played a Blade Runner role playing game, a homebrew one back in the 90s, because it doesn't take much to homebrew. You just take a cyberpunk setting and you take out the cybernetics and you've got it. And then we are talking about this one. There have been dozens of Blade Runner-esque games. So it's interesting that only now. I mean, Alien's a bit different because we've had Alien games. We had an Alien Leading Edge back in the 90s, so it was cool to see it come back. But a Blade Runner game, first, unlike the Alien franchise, which is extremely large and extremely rich, Blade Runner, there isn't much. There's a couple novels which are non-canon. You've got 2 movies. There isn't a lot to work from. So they're going to have to create a lot of new original content for it.
Well,
and at that point, what sets it apart from what Mike Pondsmith did?
I have no idea. We need to. Well, I need to buy the game to find out. Oh, exactly. And the last bit. Also, and this is because I am now. Yesterday, I finished reading Morgborg. And okay. I'm not reviewing it tonight because I need to read it again. Is that weird? The game. It is very strange, really, really strange, very appealing, but very strange. And Free League has released, or is releasing Cyborg, which is the cyberpunk version of Morgborg. So I wonder what that is going to be like. But that sounds very interesting because Morgborg is so bizarre, so surreal that, I don't know, Salvador Dali would be proud of it, I think.
that's mighty shoes to fill that.
Yeah, no, seriously, it is a very bizarre game. Not necessarily in the setting, but the way that's been designed and created, and the way it plays and runs, it's just weird. I really need to read it again. So next episode, I can give you a full proper review. So those are my news.
So obviously, in my news, there have been 2 things. One we talked about. We had some opinions on it before. Yours was I thought was very interesting, and it actually, when you said it, it reminded. I'll bring it up why it reminded me of something else. But we saw what's been going on, and I'm trying to bring up the link here for some reason. There we go. There was a report that came through Dinosaur Island and Machikoro studio employees alleged toxic workplace directly caused by negligent owners. And we're talking once again the fact that Most game companies, both role playing and board games, are not owned by corporate executives, with exception of maybe Asmodee, but are in fact run by the people who create the game because they wanted to create board game. In fact, so many games we were just talking about them. Games are defined by the one person that started the game and runs it and creates most of the content. So once again, we're dealing with Pandasaurus, and it's owned by a married couple, Molly Wardlaw and Nathan McNair. And apparently, supposedly, the reports are they maintain a toxic environment through negligence, mismanagement, and manipulation. 7 former employees, contract and freelance workers, and partner designers spoke to a Dicebreaker under anonymity about the mental and emotional strain they endured while working for the publisher behind titles like Dinosaur Island, Machikoro, and the upcoming Fox experiment. They allege that the vast majority of Pandasaurus games' internal issues lead back to a management style they characterize as both absentee and painfully involved in the smallest details. Um, and of course, one of the biggest problems is their inability to pay workers.
Now that's a big issue. That is a very, very big issue.
Yeah. Um, so that's been when you have one person saying it's something you can dismiss. When you have a lot of people saying it's something you can't ignore. And the report, you can find it on Dicebreaker. There's actually a full report where they go into a lot of details. And there's been some hemorrhaging of staffing there. And I can see to read the full article, but your comment. They, of course, Bandasaurus denies any allegation of a toxic work environment. They say our employees are offered unlimited parent of PTO, mental health days, and sick days, and paid maternity and paternity leave. Our employees are also provided company paid benefits, including dental insurance, vision insurance, health insurance, and life insurance. My response to that is our employees are offered the basic minimum that you should have for a work environment.
Well, that to be honest, that is what I was thinking. It's a bit. Um, Hello. Yeah, I'm not going to give you a pat in the back for offering, the basic decent human being things that everyone should have.
Yeah.
No, that doesn't cut it.
So, yeah, but your response, you said in the comment when I first sent you that article saying, so they're just like every other employer nowadays. And when you said that, I was just like, yeah, because almost every person I know that has been loyal to a employer has left that employer in the last few years because of a pattern of abuse that we never really knew about, but was always there. And like I said, I left Staples at 5 years because it turned toxic, and this is the same job that I adored not 5 years earlier. So I thought it was really interesting, and how I tell my wife that if my role playing career falters and I have to go back to the job scene, it's gonna be really hard for me because I I can't not stand for that type of toxic behavior. I can't. I'll say no. Someone gets so someone says to me, he's like, because I have been in interviews, like, oh, by the way, we're expecting you to work 50 to 60 hours a week. I'm like, no, I'm done. And he's like, yeah, but there's paid benefits. Like, I don't care. I'm not giving you 50 hours a week. You get 40 hours a week because that is legal. That is quite literally the legal maximum.
And that
And
should
I'm
be that
sorry.
should be enough. And if it isn't enough, then the company has an issue that they need to address. That's it.
Exactly. And so the funny thing is that they'll go, well, we'll find somebody. Because I know I have been in a conference room with a manager, with a district manager who said, we believe we can ask this of you, which means we know we can legally insist on it. Now, of course, funny thing is they got in trouble a couple of years later and that stopped because turns out you can't
Exactly.
legally try to force people to work more.
Yeah.
But a lot of companies still do it. I work for a tire place, the same thing. You have to be here from 8 o'clock, 7 o'clock in the morning till 5:30 at night. You get a half an hour break. And then it's like, well, and if you stay with us for a year and a half, eventually you'll get these massive bonuses. Like, yeah, but I gave you my life, and I don't want to do that. And the same thing with behavior. We're just like, we don't offer this, this, or this. We don't offer this. I go, no, that's fine. I'm done. And it's like, well, you have to work up the ladder. I go, no, no, no. I am not going to work for slave wages in a toxic environment on the hope that in a year I can pull myself out of that. I am pushing 50 years old. I have a very good resume. I do not start as a slave.
No, to be honest, nobody should have to start like that, and nobody
Yeah.
should have to put up with that sort of behavior. So, firstly, I have to say one thing to the people who've talked to Dicebreaker anonymously: you fucking rock. Simple as that. You know, that's amazing that you've been able to do it. And I don't think if anybody is thinking, oh, they should have put their names. No, no, no. They should not have to put their names. They wanted to talk anonymously. I think it's great that they have come forward. And if they wanted to put their names to it, then they should have to go to court or face further consequences, which is not cool at all. So that's it. The important thing is that this behavior has come out. Yes, it's pretty much like in any other company.
Yeah, as
And
long as the website is respectable. Obviously, if the National Enquirer says multiple inside sources, I'm like,
well,
well, you've proven that you're wrong.
or Fox,
Um,
something like that. Then I'm sorry,
exactly.
I'm sorry. No, but this is respectable. This is as it should be. And to be perfectly honest, this sort of thing should also be considered regarding the response. Because quite frankly, if the response is, "Oh, but we give you the very basics. We are not bad. Look, you have." Yeah, no, that's not enough. I'm sorry, that is not enough. And to be, anything that doesn't start with, okay, we hear you. We need to find out exactly why you feel this way and do whatever it takes to make sure that you stop feeling this way. Nothing that starts with anything different is going to be worth my mustard. That is it. Because it doesn't matter. I mean, these two people could be the loveliest people in the world and be absolutely wonderful to every single puppy on the planet. But the point is that if they make somebody feel that way, they have to stop. Even if they do it accidentally, they have to stop. That's it. So nothing. If it doesn't, whatever answer they give, if it doesn't address that, then screw you. That's it. I'm not interested in you anymore. But having said that, it is true that I think toxicity is so widespread today that you're probably gonna find it pretty much anywhere, and it is a matter of finding out if or what you can do to stop that sort of toxicity, if anything at all, or if you can get away from it, which is when things become really problematic. I have some toxicity in my company and I really like it and I am quite happy in my job at the moment, but there is some toxicity. I'm just too far away from it to be affected directly, so I don't care. I can deal with it. But if I couldn't, I would have to either leave the company or fight it. That's it. And in board games and role playing games companies, one of the things is that so many people are so passionate about what they do that they don't want to stop doing it. And because finding a job in the gaming industry, a well enough paid job in the gaming industry is not easy. People put up with all sorts of things because they don't want to leave the industry. And that has to stop. We really, really need to do something to make sure that the industry pays what it has, that jobs are advertised in the right place, that companies can hire pretty much anywhere because jobs very rarely need to be centralized nowadays. So people can speak up and can go from one good job to another good job to another good job without having to go from one bad job to another less bad job to another less bad job. That has to stop somehow. So,
well, I mean, I 100% agree, and you're right. This is not isolated to any one industry. This is systemic across everything. And I think, and the fact that people think that things are getting better, but I think that's because internet warriors that are fighting the good fight, but ultimately are going on deaf ears. And no greater example is this belief. It's a very much I like to say an American belief that working in a toxic environment is somehow a badge of honor, and I don't understand how that was like the whole Elon Musk thing that Elon said, if you can't handle it, here's 3 months severance, get out. But if you can handle it, you're going to be working over hours, you're going to be working overtime, you're going to be going through absolute hell. And then shockingly enough, a large majority of Twitter walked off because he thinks, once again, this American corporate belief that working 60 hours a week for a company is part of the reward.
Bullshit.
And you understand the fact that I would work 60 hours if I'm a filmmaker and I'm making my own movie and could call the shots. I don't think it's work. I'm working on this film, and it's not really the job. But if I have to punch a clock in some place, it better be somewhere that's satisfying. But yeah, so I 100% agree. On a secondary news, and this is going to be an ironic statement given what we just talked about.
Yeah.
But an inside source within either Hasbro or Wizards of the Coast has stated that they were bouncing around the idea of removing the capability of third-party content in relation to 1D&D. And they said this was a reputable source that had been right about other things, and that's why they abandoned it. That being said, the website that ran it was notorious for having very clickbaity articles in the past. And this was obviously something that I was interested in, this idea that 1D&D might be killing third-party homebrew content. And of course, just today, at the recording of this on Tuesday, November 22nd, that Wizards of the Coast came out officially and said, we've not made a decision on anything in either way. We will always support third-party publishing going forward. We haven't decided what capacity that's going to be in, but we will never, ever turn our back on third-party publishers. And I said, I told you so, because when the first announcement came out, I made a post saying, this is quite literally bullshit. It is literally impossible. Now, I said that most likely what happened was some guy was sitting in a boardroom and somebody said, hey, we don't, like, probably somebody from Hasbro that was sitting in a meeting at Wizards of the Coast and said, hey, can we get rid of this can we third-party publishing thing? Can we stop that? And then some guy wrote down, like, oh my God, that's going to be, and one person said, yeah, let's get rid of that. And then somebody went, oh my God, they're going to kill third party. He wrote it down so he can mention it later. But he didn't bother relaying the next half of the conversation when every other person on the board said, oh yeah, we're not doing that. First of all, we can't legally do that. We have no legal grounds to do that. And we've already created a legal standpoint that we can't go back on. So there's nothing we can do about it. Because, but I said that what there could be was talk about, because 1D&D is going full digital. They're creating their own digital play front to compete with Roll20, and virtual tabletops and a whole bunch of others. They may say, we're not selling and we're not open sourcing this system, so you won't be allowed to play any third-party content on our platform. That's fine. A large majority of the audience is still going to use the other virtual tabletops or just do pen and paper like a huge audience does. They can't stop it. And the other thing, of course, is the fact that they can say, oh yeah, 1D&D is not going to have an SRD. I go, great. We'll just use the 5e SRD, which you can't because it's part of the open gaming license.
Correct.
And I know this from Goodman Games because when 4th edition came out, 4th edition didn't have an OGL. It had a GSL, which means you had to follow their rules. But if you did, you got this wonderful plate that's actually had the word Dungeons and Dragons on it, which a lot of people freaked out on. I didn't. I signed on to it. And guess what? Wizards of the Coast never canceled my license, despite all the stuff I put out. They never revoked anything, and they never tried to take away my IP that some people were claiming that Wizards was going to do. So there's possible that if going with 1D&D, they may say, look, if you want to go OGL with 5th edition, you can do that. We can't stop you. I want to reiterate, we can't stop you. You know, that's why we have the 5e logos. We can't say the word D&D. We've been doing this for a long time. But even when Goodman Games signed on to the GSL, it said you couldn't produce content under the GSL until I think October of 2008. He was putting out modules in July, but he didn't say D&D. He didn't put the stamp in, but he still did it under the guise of the 3.5 OGL. It's just 4E compatible. They never did anything to him because they had no legal grounds. Because thanks to the Supreme Court back 50 years ago, thanks to monopoly, you cannot trademark or rule. Now, there's always been copyrighted terms regarding specific things. Mind flayers, beholders, these are specific creations. that's owned by D&D, and we have never been able to play with those things. That's fine. We're homebrewing new content. We don't need these name brand things. I don't need to say the word Mordenkainen or Forgotten Realms in my
No.
creations. Um, there were some play arounds I did with fourth edition to avoid any issues, and in the end, I don't think I needed to do it. I'm glad I did it because it made my setting more original, and I've never bothered to go back to the original format when I moved on to 5e. I just said, these are the Fae, these are the Fae races, they're called different things. I'm not calling mine wood elves or gray elves anymore. I took that out when I moved to fourth edition, and I've not looked back because I like it the way I do it now. But they may say one D&D is going to have a game systems license, which means if you want to produce stuff for one D&D, here's your D&D stamp that says it's compatible with one D&D. But right now, looking at the two rule sets that they've released, they're not changing enough anyway to justify a separate license for one D&D.
Well, but that doesn't mean that they can't have it. I think what's possibly happened is that they have contemplated, as a scenario, what will happen if we didn't have an OGL? What will happen if there was no license? How much material would we be able to dish out and how much we would sell? I reckon that they were probably trying to figure out how much D&D is being sold because there is third-party content and how much third-party content is out there compared with the amount of content that Wizards of the Coast could possibly produce. Also, I reckon that they need, and that this is probably something that they have to do, and is to incorporate either the electronic materials into the license or specify in the license that electronic materials are not contemplated, or how they have to be contemplated if they want to be sold through this platform that they are creating. So the thing is that it's evolving not just in the terms of rules, but also in the way that the game itself is going to be delivered and how many services people are going to have available for the game. So I wouldn't be surprised if the next iteration of the OGL said that if you're going to write for 5e for one D&D, then you must do it through our servers, through our shops, that sort of thing.
Even then, once again, since it is impossible for them to crack down on 5th edition content, they can't do anything about that. There is GM's Guild, which is a very, very, very massive database for publishers that don't make any money.
Yes, true.
Because I hate to break this to you, if you're publishing for under DM's Guild, it's a shroud that you will never get out of. I have never published anything under DM's Guild, and I have no desire to ever do that because I'm not saying it's something negative. I'm saying that market is so overly saturated, you're not going to make it. I don't know if there's a single. I have to take a look. I don't know if there's a single DM's Guild title that's sold more than Silver Badge on Drive-Thru-RPG. It is such a saturated marketplace. Even when I see the most popular titles on their platform, I don't even see badges on them at all, which means like there is a massive market saturation on DM's Guild. Where Drive-Thru-RPG is going to do just fine. Nothing's going to change. I don't think my market is going to change much when one D&D comes out, because it's not like a million, like that's like 10 million more people are going to just jump onto one D&D. This is the reason why second edition Pathfinder failed, because everyone's like, I have 40 books of Pathfinder first edition. I'm not going to buy this new book. You still have this massive conservative movement within role playing with people just not to move on. Fifth edition D&D is very popular. They don't want to change it too much because they don't want to alienate that audience, because that audience is just growing. It hasn't flatlined. We have a new movie coming out. It has continued to grow and climb. They want to adopt this one D&D to create some revision. This is basically 5.5. And they want to finally embrace the digital marketplace, which is something that they probably realize now that they should have jumped on 12 years ago. And the fact that they haven't jumped on now, and they're only jumping on now, meaning they are playing catch up on a marketplace that has already left them behind in certain circles. But to have them come out and say, there will always be third-party support, and my response as a publisher is like, I appreciate you saying that. I haven't needed your permission in about 10 years, and I still don't require it. If you're going to do something that says, here, we're not going to offer this badge, but here are some rules, I'll look at those rules and see. But if I don't, I'm not losing sleep over it. And anybody who's a veteran or knows anything about who's a third-party publisher who's produced content for 5e, if you are at all, if you're a veteran in this industry, you should not be losing any sleep over this. And there have been some reactionary people that have been freaking out. And I'm like, calm down. Nothing's changing. No one's taking your toys away. This is not even a threat. You know, it's literally saying George Lucas is going to come to your house and take away your action figures. No, no, nobody ever will.
No,
This is a false thing. And so this was once again an inside source that created a trigger that made a corporate guy realize, oh, we could post this on Game Rant and get clickbait. And it became such clickbaity that Wizards of the Coast had to respond, which of course creates a new article, which is clickbait. But so yeah, so I to say, um, it's not going to, you know, and I was telling my fans, it ended up being a very, very large article, a very popular post on my own page where a lot of people were commenting. And once again, there were a lot of people who were alarmists that were doing things. And people said that, oh my God, if they do that, I'm going to abandon D&D. I'm like, they're not taking away your books. You can still play D&D. Nothing's going to change. But there
you
is
know,
still a lot of reactionary people, which I think is just very humorous. The fact that people are falling for it.
I know, but you know, that's RPG, and that's you know, fandom in general. So I don't. I when you told me about this in Facebook, my you know what my response was. You know, I just lolled, um, loud, very very loud, because I thought it's a completely stupid thing. I'm taking into account what website that article comes from. It is not the first time that they hear bells and they play a whole symphony out of
Yeah.
a triangle ping. So I am not interested. I don't think anything is going to happen. I think they will tweak the license to update it a little bit with their concept, sorry, with the content and the new way of delivering the game. But that is it. So yeah, no, OGL ain't going nowhere, mates. That's the way it's gonna be. So
that is it for the news. Now we're on to reviews.
yes, I have this, which is called Crescendo of Violence. This is a game
A
by
neo-noir role-playing game.
Yep. This is a game written by Alan Barr, who has this amazing ability of condensing a huge amount of stuff in very small games. And it's been published by Osprey Game. By the way, Osprey Games, thank you very much for sending me the game, because this was great fun to read. It's got a cost of 25 UK pounds, US $35, and Canadian $45. It's a hardback, full color, A5 sort of size. Not very many pages, so it's about 144 in total. It's not huge, but it's packed with information. Art direction is absolutely fantastic. It's illustrated by Andrew Thompson, and as the name mentioned, it's called a neo-noir role-playing game, and the whole thing stinks of neon everywhere. It uses color palettes that should not work, and yet they work beautifully. The illustrations are fantastic, good enough all over the place, more than good enough. They're excellent all over the place, in a more than good enough amount, all of them, and really help create the perfect atmosphere. There is absolutely no question whatsoever of the kind of world that you're going to be playing in. Now, this is Blade Runner. That's it. This is a world of Blade Runner, and the only visible difference between the world of Blade Runner and A Crescendo of Violence is that in Crescendo of Violence, the world has some sort of wireless, connectless energy source. So you're never out of juice. So your phone is connected through air. Anywhere you go, your phone is being connected. Your car is being connected. Your cyborg implants are connected and being powered all the time. And there's so much energy out there that there are floating buildings and cities where the wealthy actually lives. That's pretty much the only difference with Blade Runner. This takes place in a New York kind of independent state that has become independent a little while ago from the United States of America and Canada. It's raining all the time, virtually all the time. There's barely any day of sunrise or sunshine, I should say. And something else that this game has a massive emphasis on is jazz music. In fact, there is an awful lot of mention of
Really focusing on more. Yeah.
neo jazz. It's all over the place. And being a performer is one of the ways that you have of actually becoming wealthy in a world that is very, very difficult to be wealthy. Mechanics are very simple. You have some stats, and you're going to roll a number of d10s based on the combination of stats and talents. The GM will set up a level of difficulty if any of your dice rolls on that difficulty or higher, then you get a success. That's it. So if you have to roll 3d10s and the difficulty is 7, you only need a 7 or higher in one of the dice for your action to succeed. That is a simple thing. Of course, there are confronted actions and there are extended actions. There are some tokens that you can use to help you do something that would be harder to do or to give you automatic successes, so on and so forth. But that, that's the gist of it. The mechanics are built on d10s. Creating characters is very simple. You just have to choose your name, your profession, and what kind of character you're going to be. Are you going to be a human? Are you going to be a droid, like the ones in Blade Runner? Are you going to be a cyborg? So you have some, mechanic play things. Are you going to be a genetically enhanced human being? What are you going to be? Good thing, you know how many games when you become a cyborg and you have implants, they say, oh, but they take away your humanity. No, not this time, not here. If you have implants, that's it. You just happen to have implants. Done. That's it. Yes, it is true, though, that you cannot mix genetic engineering and cyber implants because they just don't mix. Fine. Fair enough. I don't see any problems with that. I have really enjoyed reading Crescendo of Violence. The game is very simple to read. There is a lot of information in it, though, so be prepared to absorb a ton of info in 144 pages. And my only caveat with this game is that it doesn't come with an adventure. It needs to have an introductory adventure. That is the only thing that I can say about this game that let me down. But then I say the same about any game that doesn't come with an adventure, because they should come with adventures. That's it. It has a very good chapter, though, on story structure, which is great because it helps you create adventures, but it doesn't give you an example of an adventure. And it has a few words about the job of the game master, which is generic content in the sense of don't be addicted to your players and remember that you also have to have fun, sort of thing. But to give you an idea, character creation starts on page 93 and finishes on page 114. That's it. That is how quick it is to create a character. So that's it. I like it. And if you're looking for a Blade Runner sort of game, this is it. Oh, by the way, there is also an AI, which I thought was very clever. There's an AI out there called Logos, which has its own country and literally runs the world economy. That is all it is interested in. Doesn't care about anything else. It just wants to run the world economy, and it does. So, yeah, it's Blade Runner.
Okay, so before I jump into, I got to mention this right here. It's called Neurospasta. It is my cyberpunk game. I originally wrote it for 4th edition, and then I came out with Pathfinder and eventually a 5th edition version. The 5th edition version is obviously very, very popular. And the reason why I bring it up just now as you were talking about it is that it has Cybernetics, except cybernetics do not cause cyberpsychosis. We have genetically engineered people and prosthetic people. We everything's run off of wireless power, and there is a AI controlled nation called IO Eden that basically is a nation that is dominant in the world because it's a very forward thinking society. So I just figured I'd just mention that.
Okay. So no comment.
No comment. No comment at all. I can't remember. Let me just see. I'm. There's a part of me that's trying to remember something here because I have a lot of robots in the story, and there's also rules regarding hacking people. The idea that everyone has cybernetic implants, and the cybernetic implants are um, wireless to control. Basically, the same system that communicates. It's the same type of energy source that powers it. And it's based off of this wireless power technology, which I thought of based off of something I had read. This was 10 some years ago, and now that technology is everywhere because it's basically wireless charging. We have it today. But the original technology was a bit more forward thinking and potentially had more far-reaching perspective. The idea that nowadays our wireless charging is just basically for our phones. You put your phone on a pad and it charges it. But the original technology had a guy literally having a car that would drive into a parking lot, and then wireless charging occurs radially from beneath you. You don't have to plug it in. You don't have to have a contact.
Well, that's what this game says.
Thing,
yes.
Yeah, and the same thing with television. This guy literally had a television, and he pressed a button, and it had no power cables to it. And it turned itself on because there was a wireless power plate 4 feet below him, and he held out his phone above the plate, 4 or 5 feet above the plate, and the phone turned on because that was the ultimate that was the ultimate point of that technology. That's where he wanted to go. Unfortunately, we're not there yet. We got to these charging pads for our phones, and then nothing's happened since then. So I find that the idea of wireless power is something that I also developed and for my game. So it's not, but I admit it's not an original concept. This is based off of what this original guy who developed the technology that we're using right now for our wireless pads, what it could do. And so the idea here was using a similar type of technology to power our cybernetic implants. So you don't have to have a plug-in into your head to charge up your cybernetic, which is something that was very much the classic cyberpunk, Ghost in the Shell, that you actually had to plug something in your head. In here, I called it the seed, and I even have this advertising poster. This is a fake poster advertising it, right?
Right.
Planting seed and the idea of these flowers growing out of people's heads, and it's not every seed. It's being abstract, right? But the idea of this kind of implant that allows you to wirelessly hook up to the internet is called a seed, and there's a whole bunch of rules around it. I'm trying to remember what the names of the giant AIs are called. If I find one that's called Logos, I'm gonna laugh my ass off. But anyway, speaking of retro, you said I was talking about Cyberpunk.
Yes.
Now, Cyberpunk 2020. A lot of people don't realize Cyberpunk 2020 is the sequel. Did you know that?
Mm-hmm.
Cyberpunk 2020 is the extremely successful sequel that Mike Pondsmith put out. The original game was Cyberpunk 2013. That was the original version that first employed what is called his interlock system. And then he came out with Cyberpunk 2020, which we now all know and love. That's what everyone talks about. But here's the thing. I'm actually not going to talk about this game because everyone knows about this game. Because in my opinion, Cyberpunk 2020 is his second best game.
Okay.
Mike Pondsmith's greatest game of all time is this one, Mechton.
All right.
Now, oddly enough, he made Cyberpunk 2013, and then he made a game which is a anime-inspired mecha game called Mechton, and then he came out with a sequel called Mechton 2, which is what most people know. And so Cyberpunk 2013 and Mechton 2 came around the same time. That's when I embraced it with my group circle. We loved it because unlike BattleTech, it was a much more free-form construction system. It had a fantastic, a very open system, and the interlock system, which he employs, was very popular. It's very easy to learn. But then, after the success of 2020, he came out with what is his definitive mecha-based anime game, and that was this title, Mechton Zeta. Now, there's also a Mechton construction system, which is a separate book, which allows you to make any mecha you can think of. And it's the most robust, most free-form construction system I've ever seen. It allows you to make anything from microscopic little robots to the SDF-1 from Macross, giant kaiju-sized machines. He had all the rules in place. And one of the most enjoyable aspects of my youth in role playing were me and my friends playing a mecha based game and having the GM say, here's how many construction points you have to work with, go for it. And the wide range of imaginative ideas that we would create is astounding. Um, One of the things I did, I created a setting called Terminals, which is actually inside Ultramodern Redo now. And I said, okay, guys, I am going to go through this mechanism system, and there are 50 unique attributes, energy weapons, transformations. Once one of you guys flags it, no one else can have it. So everyone's going to truly be unique. So one guy says, "I want to be transferable." Okay, you get transferable. No one else can be transferable. I want to be able to teleport. Okay, you have teleportation. No one else can get teleportation. But that's how robust and how freeform the system was. That was the MTS. This is Mechton Zeta. Then he came out with another version of for Mech construction called the Mechton construction system, and it just builds on this freedom. It's such a good system. I blatantly ripped it off for the mecha construction system in Ultramodern Redo. I don't even hide it. I even state it in the rule book that this is heavily, heavily inspired from Mike Pondsmith's construction system. It's been adapted to 5th edition. But I basically ran through his book and went, yep. And if I just copied what he did, it could self-balance itself because in the fact that it's not balanced. One of the things about the game, which I love, is the fact that the GM is responsible for making sure that players don't go off the deep end. Because I was experienced as a GM and an experienced player with this system. So when I was playing a game, he said, you got 300 points, which isn't a lot. I've seen mechas in games that are 2,000 points. He gave us 300 points, and everyone had these cool designs. And I walked on, and and he said, oh, your mech's kind of cool and interesting. And at one point, we had a fight where we were fighting each other, and I annihilated every person in the group because unfortunately, I know the right systems to do the right things that could just utterly create an overly powerful mech. So it's kind of the GM's responsibility to make sure that doesn't happen, to allow people to have that creativity without letting one player min max it. But that's the risk. And I enjoy the fact that he created that sandbox. It is the ultimate sandbox system. Good luck trying to find it. Mechton, I actually own, this is not just bringing up the only book. I own all of the Mechton books. I have Mechton 2, I have the MTS, I have Zeta, I have the Zeta Plus, which is the mecha construction system for Mechton Zeta. And they also created a bunch of rule sets for Mechton, including the Europa Report done by DreamPod 9. They did a game called Bottoms based on an anime. They did a Bubblegum Crisis RPG that uses the same structure. But yes, if you ever want to see a fantastic game by the same people who did Cyberpunk 2020, you pick up Mechton Zeta, one of the most underappreciated role-playing games in history.
Is this your way to actually reach out to Mike Pondsmith so he re-releases the game or something?
Well, the funny thing is that most of his efforts been concerned with still focusing on Cyberpunk. Now, the oddly thing is the fact that there is a lot of people also don't realize with Cyberpunk 2020 that I said there's a prequel people don't know about 2013, but a lot of people also don't know about there is a sequel to 2020, a new version, and nobody knows about it and nobody plays it because this is like this, as people say, this is perfection. No need to muck around. So as a result, Artel Azorian hasn't produced much, if at all, in the last few years. I don't think, and if they have, they're basically just working off because they just released Cyberpunk 2020 as Cyberpunk Red, and it's basically just a reprint and a revision of the classic system. That's been selling like hotcakes. So as long as he has his Cyberpunk cash cow, I'm fairly certain he's not going to return to Mechton, even though when he came out, those were his two definitive franchises, Mechton and Cyberpunk. And obviously Mechton was popular enough for him to do two revisions and an expansion and settings. But Cyberpunk proved to be the more popular book, and so he focused on that for the rest of his career, and that's what he's most well known for. But I find it interesting that everyone talks about how amazing Cyberpunk is. But in my youth, we actually played Mecton and Mecton Zeta more than we played Cyberpunk 2020.
Well, it would be good if that came out again because it does sound very good, I have to say. Right, we've been at it pretty much an hour now, but there is one more thing that we have 15 minutes to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
You wanted to talk about conventions.
I want to talk about conventions, and I will let you get into yours. I'm sure you have thoughts on this, but I am concerned with a lot of independent publishers will go to conventions, and there are several different types of conventions you can attend to. You can attend a trade show, which I also, and I don't mean a game trade show. I mean a generic trade show, which can also be a craft show, which is where small business people are displaying their work. You have fan conventions like Comic Cons, which is part of a fan convention, and then you have a game show, which is Spiel, PAX Unplugged, and so forth. And unfortunately, we're reaching a point where if you're a game publisher, the only venue you have left to sell is the latter category. Fan conventions, I don't know if there's a future for fan conventions. We've already seen in some circles some of these conventions are canceling. They were already going downhill before the pandemic, and now they're struggling to come back. And I fear that most of these fan conventions that cities are putting on are going to fail. And primarily, one of the biggest reasons why they're failing is they're not bringing enough of a good reason for people to attend. You bring some celebrities down, people come down to see the celebrities, and then they leave. And the reason why they leave is that fan conventions now are basically populated by 2 or 3 people. You have cosplayers and people who want to see cosplayers, and the people who want to see the celebrities. Very, very few people are going to fan conventions with their wallets. Cosplayers don't have room for their wallets, and cosplayers do not pay. And because now 60 to 70% of the FanCon's attendants are cosplayers, if you're a vendor at a FanCon, you are not making any money. And it's not because, oh, people, Chris, you're just saying that because you're not making money at these conventions. I've got eyes. I've looked around with people, and I'm not seeing anyone walking around with bags. The exception are unfortunately third-party Chinese resellers that are selling Lego knockoffs, other action figure knockoffs, and so forth. And they are making money, but they also have zero turnaround, and they are starting to dominate this. And the convention organizers are making no attempt to curtail this, which is really, really unfortunate. I've been part of a convention community, and my conventions have very little third party. I try to stop it best I can. And I have actually stopped several people from having tables at these conventions, and they've complained like other conventions let me in. I go, yes, but we're not into piracy. But most conventions, including the large ones, don't care. The largest convention in Canada are the Toronto and Calgary Comic Cons. They don't care. They will take your money, and most of these conventions will not make any money. Trade shows are also are a bit better because people come to a trade show with their wallets because it is basically a small business fair. No one comes to a small business fair in cosplay. There are no celebrities. There's no reason to come to a small business fair unless you're there to buy. So the issue with those is that the only ones that are successful are seasonal ones at Christmas time because people are thinking about Christmas. And unfortunately, board games are not always going to be your top line. You're going to go to a game store to pick up your board games. You're not thinking of going to a small business fair to buy board games. But that's still being said, I am seeing those growing. So I'm actually thinking that potentially trade shows may work. My problem, being in Western Canada, is that there is only one game show worth attending, and that is Shucks, which is in Vancouver. It happens once a year. And it's so expensive to stay in Vancouver, to travel to Vancouver, that I would have to rent a U-Haul, transport my entire collection, and sell most of it in order to make a profit, because that's how expensive Shucks can be. And so you imagine how expensive Gen Con or Eschenspiel would be. So it becomes dominated by the big companies that have the big weight and clout. And they're bringing games that people know about and then they want to play. So I really respected you, the fact that you went to Essen and you focused on these third-party publishers because, or sorry, these, I would say not third-party, I would say these AA or single A publishers instead of the AAA customers. And I really respect that because they're not getting enough attention. So I'm being very worried now that fan cons are dying for us. whether or not we're worried that we're going to get squeezed out of these big cons by these big first AAA companies that are coming in with their big productions, because it's one of those situations where it's kind of like the Oscars. The best writing Oscar never goes to a film that failed at the box office. It's usually an indie film which was critically acclaimed, may not have made money, but then it wins an Oscar for best screenplay. No one who wins a best actor Oscar wins it for a bad movie. It's the hype train for one film that becomes popular and then it sweeps. So my question to you is, with the exception of your bright star focusing your spotlight on these third-party publishers, do you think there's a future for these people at these conventions to be successful?
No, I don't think these people coming. I mean, not in fact, none of them do come. None of them come into conventions, fan conventions in Europe. Make it. They just don't. It doesn't make any sense. As you said, it's too expensive. However, I think what's going to happen is that there needs to be a shift in how people think about conventions. And one of the things I see around me, and I don't attend them. I don't want to go to conventions in Spain because I don't want to mingle with the geeks in here. Is that there are a lot of them, like a ton of them, but they are quite small. So they might be the conventions that can attract maybe 300, 400, 500 people tops. But the friends who go there, they go to sell their wares. They make Etsy type goodies, like cushions and soaps and dice trays, that sort of thing. And they sell a lot. They have found that they actually sell, but they are not particularly game focused. They just sell things, like a cushion with a beholder on it. And they found that not enough to make a living, I hasten to add, but enough to cover the cost of their expenses to go there and all the expenses of all the materials and make a little bit of money to get more material to do more things and have fun creating new stuff. That's all they do. We don't have a single convention in Spain that makes money for role-playing games. We don't have a Dragon Meet. We don't have a Compulsion. We don't have a UK Games Expo. We have two smaller conventions. One of them is a trade show in Cordoba. Happens every year. Alas, too close to Spiel, so I cannot go. And there's another one called Game On that happened just before the pandemic, I think, and maybe last year once. And that's starting to be a little bit, but it mixes both board games and role-playing games. And it's just not big enough. Places like the Manga Salon is not games friendly. It's not, in fact, trade friendly unless you're a very specific type of trader. So I think what's going to happen is trade shows are going to disappear, an awful lot of them. Fun shows are going to disappear even more. But they're going to become very small. I don't think they're going to go away completely, but they're going to become very, very small. And you're right. I don't think that for small publishers, most of them are going to make any sense. So I think a shift is going to be needed where small publishers get together and join forces. So you can divide by geographical area and one person take an awful lot of people's games to make it worth it. Otherwise, yeah, I think trade shows are the way to go. But how much you have to sell, distance is an issue. Definitely. How much you have to sell, that's a very tricky one to answer. But I reckon the Gen Con and Spiel will become bigger because people going there are the people who are not going anywhere else. And more people are not going to go anywhere else.
Yeah. It makes you wonder if it'd be nice if a major player, like once again, if it's a big name company that can pull clout or people in the celebrity sphere ran, let's say like Dice Tower or Rado or a combination of the two, decide we're going to do a convention but we are going to do this new Dice Tower Con. We'll put it somewhere, whatever it may be. But the we're going to make it a little different in the fact that we're not allowing major publishers to attend. This is an indie
Not
game
gonna happen.
publisher. Exactly. You're 100% right. You're
Not gonna happen.
100% right. But wouldn't it be something if somebody major player had the clout and going, this is a large event and we're only if you want to attend, you have to be a small time publisher with a game library of 3 4 games or less, and without a contract to a major publisher, which means you're on your own.
Okay. But you know why that's
You
not gonna
you
that's
fill you fill the event
no, it
because there's
won't.
hundreds of them.
You would fill the event with publishers, not with people. And I'm going to say something very, very controversial, and something that's
I
going
don't
to
think it will be.
upset. It's going to upset an awful lot of people. But people want hype. The average gamer wants hype. The average
Not
gamer,
controversial at all. But you're 100%
the
correct.
average gamer wants Fantasy Flight. They want Come On. They want Feld. They want Lacerda. They are not interested in the smaller, for me, cooler games. They're just not interested because they're not big enough. They want to be able to go to their gaming clubs and the gaming group with, look at this new Frosthaven box. I spent €100 on this shit and it plays great. That's what people want.
Which is funny because once again, we were talking about comparisons to the film industry. Although we have Cannes and we have the Berlin, which are festivals where these big name come down to, you also still have Venice, Sundance, Telluride, and these are festivals that are focused around small films. In fact, they are almost a showcase to sell these short films to big distributors so they can buy the rights and sell it.
Exactly. But that's the thing. Those shows are not attended by the fans. They are attended by the industry. The industry pays attention to them because that's where they can spot where the big name is going to come out. And that is what happens with, for instance, these Asian companies. Oink Games got the Spiel award this year. Not the Spiel des Jahres, the Spiel award this year for Hey Yo. Now Oink Games is going to be distributed pretty much anywhere, and I bet you anything that they will get a distribution deal in the US and Canada that's going to make them millions because they have fantastic games. They would not have appeared in an awful lot of people's radars unless they had come to prominence at Spiel with a small award that an awful lot of industry folk pay attention to. But the thing that people want is not the Spiel Award. They want the Spiel des Jahres Award.
That's they want the one that want the one that wins the top prize.
Correct. They want the one that everybody else is playing. They want the one that Ludonaut won. That's what people want. And it happens exactly the same in the world of role-playing games. I am absolutely certain that I will have thousands upon thousands upon thousands of subscribers in my YouTube channel if I dedicated to covering just D&D. Thousands. Yeah. Because that is what people want. But I cover the smaller game. I cover the indie game. And in board games, I cover the games that nobody's heard of. People are not interested. The reason why nobody's heard of those games is because people are not interested in those games. People want the big thing. We are flashy animals. We love flashy shit. Even if it is shit, but we want flashy shit. So if you see a game that's made an awful lot of hype and it's getting an awful lot of money, if that game, you put it in the hands of a very small, very unknown publisher, the likelihood is that no one would ever hear from it. It doesn't matter how good it is, unless they manage to do incredibly well in a place like Kickstarter. People want flashiness. Mm-hmm. And people want to play what everybody else is playing. People don't want originality. Even though, but look at this new Vital Lacerda game. Oh, look at this new Stefan Feld game. And I look at all those games and think, but I have already played it more than once. And it was called so and so. It was another game. And it's already there. There's nothing new there. It's just the way that they've used the mechanisms new. But the mechanisms themselves, nah. They're not new. There's nothing original. If you want original, you have to go to the small one. It takes a lot of effort to actually find it. And they also cost a lot more money because of import duties and postage. So I understand it. But don't get me wrong, players want the flashiness that everyone else is talking about. Otherwise, they're going to go to hell. Companies will go down. And that's why you will be able to fill up a convention with very small publishers because there are thousands of them, but you wouldn't be able to fill it up with public because the public is not interested unless you have a big name associated with it.
Like I said, if the Dice Tower presents this, you would have people coming down because it's Dice Tower. And then people would come in and going, where's Simon? And then someone else would explain to them, like, did you not read the sign? This is an indie publisher's area.
Correct.
And then some people would leave. But the point is that you would have the attendance. If somebody just put that up as for a lark, yeah, you're right. Nobody would bother attending. But it has the backing of somebody major. Like if Shucks decided to put out an event for like that, you would have some people attending. In fact, it would be much more interesting to see it as a trade show where company executives come down. But this is one of the things where there aren't very many parent companies. They're usually larger companies that are owned by people who design their own games. You don't see Paramount, Warner Brothers buying the rights to movies. You don't see that equivalent. It happens very often. It doesn't happen very often. Like I said, when I always think of one of my all-time favorite games of all time, which is an indie game out of Italy called Kepler. Kepler 2042, maybe no, Kepler 30. Yeah, anyway, it's a game called Kepler something. It is a space colonization game that's very, very positive about the future and about space colonization. Renegade bought the rights to import it, and so they did an importing, and they glossed it up. They made the, they glossed up the production design. I think they made it worse because they made it more a bit more flashy sci-fi rather than being like 2001 realistic sci-fi. They didn't change the rules. It's still one of the greatest games out there, but I'm pretty proud that I own the Italian version rather than the Renegade version. But this doesn't happen too often. And it started because these guys already spent a ton of money getting their games into stores in America. Most of these guys, as you said, don't even have a chance to get out of their country. So how do you notice them, right? And it's definitely problematic when you deal with Asia because you have a continent to cross to get to these gaming conventions. Where in Italy, well, we're going to go to Eschenspiel. Let's get into our car and drive 6 hours.
Literally.
Yeah, so it's a bit easier for them, and then they get a bit more extra money, and then they distribute over to North America to these big companies, and next thing you know, some people buy it. And so Tom reviews it. Tom reviewed Kepler. I bought Kepler blind. I just thought it was a fun game, and then I found out that Tom liked it, and then it turns out I loved it. I did a review for Dice Tower because I thought it was a great game, and then Renegade came out with the new version, and I commented that the Renegade version I felt was inferior from a production standpoint. It looked nice. It had the spit and polish of a big name game, but I felt the visual style of the original Kepler had a bit more soul.
Fair enough. I haven't seen either. So I wouldn't know. So yeah, I mean, going back to the topic, conventions, an awful lot of them are going to die. People are going to have to think about which ones they're going to have to attend, and I reckon that attending conventions that might be different could be better.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I've always thought, I told this to Cubicle 7 many years ago. When I first met them and they were releasing one of the editions of the Doctor Who game, and I asked them, "One, are you going to go to a Doctor Who convention?" "Oh, we've never gone to a Doctor Who convention." "So what are you waiting for? You have a Doctor Who game, but yeah, it's not a games convention." "Hello, it's a Doctor Who convention.
Yeah.
You have a captive audience in there. You should try it." So it's that sort of thinking that I reckon companies.
Yeah. So if I have advice, if you're a first-time publisher, because one thing I noticed about the big trade show I just went to a couple of weeks ago, my board game didn't do very well, but what did very well, shockingly enough, were my role-playing games. Now, a year ago at the same convention, there's no way I would have sold role-playing games, but because D&D is so hugely popular, I just brought them, and I sold out of half of my stock of role-playing games. So there is a market and there is a demand for them. So the only issue, Allegheny Christmas, if you're an indie publisher and you're listening to this and you're trying to see which gaming convention you can attend, and you're realizing it's nearing the end of November and you're basically done for the year, look out and find the nearest Christmas
Yep.
fair and go there because people are going to these things with wallets. They're buying money,
Hmm.
buying board games and role playing games for their families are in. You may be shocked. To give you an example, I sold more at the last two craft shows I've been to than the last two fan conventions combined.
Yep. I can easily believe
And
that.
attendance is cheap. You can attend a craft show for $50 or $100.
Yeah,
Attending a fan con could be $1,000.
it's a lot better. Just pick your battles. I would say people have to pick their battles and pick different battles, different battlefields, and I reckon that it is more likely to lower the cost and increase your sales a little bit if you target an audience in a different place, not necessarily a different audience because gamers will buy games wherever they are. But if a gamer finds a game in an odd place that they didn't expect, they will pay an awful lot of attention. And those people who don't expect it, they will be piqued by the curiosity. And that is a potential buyer, I think.
So, all right, that is our topic for today, conventions. I think next week, as a preview, I think we should talk about video games to board games.
Okay, I love the idea. Absolutely adore that idea. But
talking about games that have been turned into board games that should be board games and are not.
Yep.
Exactly.
Yes, I love that idea very, very much because I have loads of those. So, humans, thank you so much for being there. As always, is very appreciated.
We're not going to be racist to cats and dogs. Any cats and dogs that are listening to this, they're more than welcome. So we're not going to be, human centric. Anybody is welcome to listen to this podcast.
Absolutely is. I don't know. I lost my. Anyway, find us, please, find us. Get in touch. podcast@gmsmagazine.com. I can be a little bit slow at replying to those emails, so please do not despair. I promise I will get to them. You can find me at Twitter, assuming it's still alive. I am at GMS Magazine. And if you actually want a different social network that I have joined recently, join Hive Social. It is slow.
Ooh.
It's just started. It's basically two guys running it. So give it a little bit of time, but it's shaping up to be very, very nice. And if you are prepared to put up with the big FA, join Facebook, where I am also at GMS Magazine, and there is a link everywhere. Please say hello.
And this has been Chris from Deus Ex Machina. You can find me at Deus Ex Machina on the internet, on Facebook. I am actually I'm on Instagram under Deus Ex Machina, but you'll actually find me under Slipstream First. I keep on saying the wrong stripe because I have a company page that I barely ever use. But Slipstream First is actually my company page. I am on TikTok now. I am no longer on Twitter.
Oh, their loss.
Yes.
Anyway, again, humans, thank you very, very much.
Peace out.